Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. It's Saturday. What does that mean? It is time for the Crime Talk recap with all of the top stories from throughout the week, all in one convenient location right here, right now. Hope you enjoy it. We'll see you next time. First on the docket, Leticia Stout. You know her. She's the woman that's kind of drug her case out for over the last year and a half as it relates to the death of Gannon Stout. Well, she had a preliminary hearing that was scheduled for both Thursday and Friday of last week. It really only went kind of a day and a half, so to speak. But Leticia Stout wasn't there. And if you recall what I said, I was very surprised by that. I've never seen that. Of 26 years of practicing criminal defense work, never have I been able to waive my preliminary hearing. Well, the judge apparently was under some misunderstanding who thought that maybe she was quarantined. Then he brought her back, had a further colloquy between Leticia Stout and the court, and determined that she just didn't want to be there. Well, anyway, we'll just leave it at that. Never seen that done before. Not sure why the court allowed that to take place. So the district attorney has filed a motion basically saying, hey, Leticia Stout didn't appear for her preliminary hearing, and that's a waiver. And the district attorney is right. The preliminary hearing is a critical stage of the proceedings. If you voluntarily absence yourself from that proceeding, guess what? You waive that hearing. So, for example, if you're entitled to a preliminary hearing, you're out on bond, you don't show up, you fail to appear, you don't get your preliminary hearing, a month later or 3 days later or 6 years later when you show up. You waived it. Next thing you do, you're set for an arraignment. And I think the district attorney is correct on this one. Now, the defense attorneys filed a motion. It wasn't really a motion. It was an explanation saying, hey, excuse her because, she gets really stressed and her anxiety really gets the best of her. So we think it would be best if she wasn't in court. Whoa. I cannot believe the attorney stated that. Okay. That may be the reasons why he's requesting it, but show me some law where that is permitted. I think the attorney got it all wrong here. The whole point of going to court is so that you have to deal with the reality of court, right? It's kind of the harassment package, so to speak. You got to take time off work. You got to come out of your cell and go do the unpleasantries of answering the allegations that have been made against you. That's kind of what our system is about. And guess what? The defendant has to be there. I have only seen the situations where a defendant has not been in court at a critical stage of the proceedings only when they have made such a disruption in the court that, they've acted up and maybe thrown things and blurted out things, and they had to be removed because they've said they weren't going to follow the court's rules of etiquette in the courtroom. Just because you feel a little anxiety, that ain't enough. So how does the court get around this and not screw up the record? Well, I think what he says was, hey, she waived her appearance. I took him at a good faith basis. It's probably technically a waiver, but I heard all the evidence that was presented at the preliminary hearing, and I still find that there's probable cause. Move on. Let's get an arraignment date. Let's get a trial date so we can go to trial within 6 months from the date of saying not guilty. People need to stop accommodating Leticia Stout, okay? Like all things in life, you get more of what you tolerate. Who's running the show? I don't know, but it kind of seems to be Leticia Stout. Alex Murdoch, that's right. He is officially at the center of the state investigation. The South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division, also known as SLED, announced Monday that it had opened a probe into Murdoch just days after news broke that he had been misappropriating funds from his law firm and has checked himself into rehab for a drug problem. Now, Murdoch resigned from his firm, which was founded by his great-grandfather, on September 3rd after other members of the firm confronted him with allegations that he had liberated some of the firm's money, reportedly in excess of $1 million. The next day, Murdoch called 911 to report that he had been shot on a remote rural road in Hampton County, South Carolina, and was ultimately flown to a hospital in Savannah for treatment for a superficial gunshot wound to the head. Now, SLED has put out a statement stating that they're investigating the entire shooting, as well as the June 7th murder of his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul, who were found shot to death on the Murdoch's hunting property. SLED stated in a statement, "I continue to urge the public to be patient and let the investigation take its course. Investigative decisions we make throughout this case and at any potentially related case must ultimately withstand the scrutiny of the criminal justice process." That was from Chief Mark Keel. He's the head of SLED. He continued on stating that as with all cases, SLED is committed to conducting a professional, thorough, and impartial investigation, no matter where the facts lead us. After Murdoch's ouster from his firm last week, the South Carolina Supreme Court suspended him from practicing law after receiving sufficient evidence that he poses a substantial threat of serious harm to the public or the administration of justice, i.e., there's pretty overwhelming evidence that he stole money. Now, that's the state's top police agency involved. It may prove more difficult for a family long suspected of enjoying outside influence in their corner of the state to avoid sustained sunlight. Now that the state's top police agency is involved, it may prove more difficult for a family long suspected of enjoying influence in their little corner of the state to avoid sustained sunlight. This case, ladies and gentlemen, is getting interesting. I told you when the news broke about Paul Murdoch's driving of the boat into the pillar, I told you there was something about this case. I didn't obviously know where things were going. The circumstances regarding the Murdoch family certainly are taking a twist, and I don't think it was a twist that most people in that particular area of South Carolina ever thought would take place. Next on the docket, it looks like the police maybe should have intervened in the Gabby Potito matter. Gabby Potito and her boyfriend, Brian Landry, embarked on a cross-country road trip this summer, but Landry returned to Florida without Gabby, and her whereabouts are unknown at this time. Now, Gabby last spoke with her mother, Nicole Schmidt, via FaceTime on August 23rd and 24th, when she may have been in Wyoming. Her mother has also received a text message from Gabby's phone on or about August 30th, but said she wasn't certain her daughter actually wrote the message. Now, Schmidt said that Landry and his parents have made no effort to return her messages or help her while her daughter remains missing. Schmidt added that Landry's sister, Cassie, is the only person from his family who communicates with her. Schmidt finds the behavior baffling, as he thought he had a warm and caring relationship with Landry and his parents. Schmidt also went on to say, "I texted Brian's mom that I was trying to get in touch with Gabby. I also texted Brian. I got no replies. I knew something was wrong. I felt something was off, and I needed to get her reported missing immediately." The report has been made to the police, and they are considering Brian Landry a person of interest at this point because so far he's refused to speak to law enforcement. Now remember, someone has no obligation to speak to law enforcement. It's better to look guilty than to be found guilty, but you're going to have to take the heat for it. Shortly after Landry returned home from the road trip without Potito, he lawyered up and has not answered investigators' requests for information at all. At this time, it is still being treated as a missing person. Why? Because there's no body, and no one said that there isn't a deceased body. And technically, there's no evidence that a crime has in fact been committed. Now, Brian Landry's attorney, Steve Bertolino, issued the statement on the disappearance of Gabriella Potito. He said in a summary, the statement says that they hope Miss Potito is reunited with her family and that the Landry family is remaining in the background at this juncture and will have no further comment. In response to the statement, Potito's family released another statement saying Brian is refusing to tell Gabby's family where he last saw her. Brian is also refusing to explain why he left Gabby alone and drove her van to Florida. How does Brian stay in the background when he is the one person that knows where Gabby is right now? And lastly, the Moab Police Departments have now said that its officers responded to an incident involving Gabby Potito and Brian Landry. Chief Brett Edge said the incident occurred on August 12th, and he said that the officers investigated the incident, but determined there was not sufficient evidence for criminal charges. No further details about the nature of the incident were provided, but Chief Edge did add that the couple were not the ones who called the police. Well, we here at CrimeTalk, who like to get it correct, have received the reports from the Moab Police Department, specifically here an Officer Eric Pratt and Officer Daniel Robbins were the responding officers. And it says that on August 12th of 2021, the Moab City Police Department officers were dispatched to a report of a domestic problem that had been taken place near the Moonflower Co-op. It appeared that the male and female had left the scene and traveling north on Main in a white Ford Transit van with a black ladder on the rear after the male and female had engaged in some sort of altercation. It wasn't clear, but I believed it was reported that the male had been observed to have assaulted the female. I heard other officers report they were off to look for the vehicle, and being that I had to pass the Moonflower in order to get to Main Street, I stopped there to see if any witnesses were still in the area. I found one identified as Chris, last name redacted out. I took down his phone number and left the scene because I heard Officer Robbins tell dispatch he'd located the suspect vehicle near the turn to Arches National Park. I heard him state that upon initiating a traffic stop, he observed the vehicle leave its lane and strike the curb before stopping near the entrance of the park. The report continues. I arrived on scene and observed as two park officers had also arrived. I assisted Officer Robbins in his investigation until I was called away to reports of an intoxicated male near the MRH posting a safety risk to himself or others. Before leaving, I spoke with the male driver of the van, the female passenger, and also called Chris to get more information from him. All three individuals gave me a similar and consistent story consisting of the basic idea that the driver of the van, a male, had some sort of argument with the female, Gabby, as I recall. The male tried to create distance by telling Gabby to go take a walk or calm down. She didn't want to be separated from the male and began slapping him. He grabbed her face and pushed her back as she pressed upon him and the van. He tried to lock her out and succeeded except for his driver's door. She opened that and forced her way over him and into the vehicle before it drove off. No one reported that the male struck the female. Both the male and the female reported they are in a loving and engaged to be married and desperately didn't wish to see anyone charged with a crime. There was no significant injuries reported, and both parties agree that Gabrielle suffers from serious anxiety, etc. It appears that the incident was more accurately categorized as a mental health emotional break than a domestic assault. I had to leave, but I understand that Officer Robbins got the male lodged through the Sikh Haven. Gabby retained possession of the van, and they agreed to separate for the night. No charges were filed, and no one wished the charges to be filed or for the separation to take place, although that was what, at minimum, Officer Robbins required in lieu of making a case against Gabby for domestic assault. Gabby is a 22-year-old female who's approximately 5'2 to 5'4 and weighs 110 to 120 pounds, while her fiancé is older, taller, and much heavier than her. He had no fear for his safety and did not exhibit any indications that he may have been a victim of a battered boyfriend syndrome. He was assessed to be low risk of danger as a result of the proximity of his fiancée, Gabby. Nothing further. There you go. Domestic dispute. I'm sorry. In every jurisdiction I've ever practiced in, that would be a domestic dispute. Now, which is a little ironic because apparently on their TikTok and Instagram page, these two look like everything is perfect, everything is lovey-dovey, and I think that's why they call it fake book, right? Because it's fake. It's not real. And, well, there you have it. So, is the boyfriend guilty of something, or did Gabby drive away that night? to yet be determined. But it looks like maybe if someone had treated this as a domestic violence situation and maybe even arrested both parties, maybe Gabby Potito would still be with us. We'll see how things turn out. The plot thickens. Please go to CrimeTalkSearch.com, sign up for a background subscription service. You'll be happy you did. If there's anyone out there you were ever curious about what was in their background, now is the time to do it. If you're going to get involved with somebody, now is the time to do it. When you go to CrimeTalkSearch.com, you put in the name, literally millions of public records are searched, and a report is generated. And it's going to give you a report. If they have multiple social media accounts, you're going to find it. If they have multiple phone numbers, multiple email addresses, it's going to be found. And more importantly, you're going to get information regarding criminal history. Hopefully the person you're searching has none whatsoever. But if it's there, it's going to be found. You're going to get everything you'd want to know, whether you're going into business or whether you're going into a personal relationship. You're going to be able to find out the information you want to know. So go to CrimeTalkSearch.com, sign up today. You'll be happy you did. All right. Now, the Moab City Police Department released body cam footage following an alleged physical altercation between Gabby Potito and her boyfriend, Brian Landry, just weeks before she disappeared. Now, we've uploaded the entire body cam video on our YouTube site. Go check it out. Now, the hour-long body cam footage shows the officers responding to a 911 call reporting an alleged domestic dispute between the pair on August 12th in Utah. A witness reported seeing a male had been observed to have assaulted the female near the Moonflower Community Cooperative, an organic grocery store. Potito and Landry then left the area in the van, but one of the officers, he was able to catch up to the van as it neared the entrance of the Arch National Park. Officers stopped the car for going 45 miles per hour in a 15 per mile hour zone. Officers noted that Potito was crying, and in their words, uncontrollably throughout the conversation, and Potito said that she was struggling with her mental health. Potito said she has OCD and anxiety, which can be triggered by stress. She said she was also working all morning and was having a little argument with Brian as well. Now, Potito told the police that she is the one that hit Brian in the arm to get his attention. Landry told officers that they had been traveling for 4 to 5 months, which has caused a strain on their relationship and increased the number of arguments that they had been having. Potito had gotten so upset that she thought Landry was going to leave her in Moab without a ride. This is according to Landry. The police took pictures of Landry to document any cuts or bruises he had and asked if he wanted the police to press charges. The police reassured Brian that couples get in fights and that they should take some time away from each other to get a shower and to cool off. Officers didn't believe that it escalated to a level of domestic assault and that it was more of a mental health crisis. Now, the father of 22-year-old Gabby Potito recently slammed Landry's family for not offering to help find his missing daughter. Brian Landry's attorney released a statement saying that they hope Potito is reunited with her family, but they'll be staying in the background at this time, and we have no further comment. To be honest, that wasn't a statement. Joseph Potito said in a press conference on Thursday, that was 4 lines of crap. But what do I know? If you honestly wish for her to come home already, then cool, let's sit down and answer questions. Gabby's father also said that Gabby had the entire trip with Landry planned out, day by day. She had an itinerary, and she did everything she was supposed to do. Gabby reached out to her family members during the entire trip, so when she stopped calling, that is when her father, Joseph, knew something was wrong. He says, you're going to stay in the background? You just traveled with this girl across the country and you're going to stay in the background? That's according to Joseph Potito. Does anybody take that seriously, he said. Do you think they care if she's missing, if they're going to stay in the background? Now, Gabby's father is pleading with Brian Landry and his family to answer questions. Are we in the right spot? Help us. At the end of the day, if I don't have my daughter, it doesn't matter. But they're not helping. The tip line is open to anyone who may have information on the disappearance of Gabby Potito, And that number is 800-220-8477. This is definitely going to be an interesting case indeed. Why does Brian Landry have Gabby Potito's van? Did he have permission for the van? There's also a little bit of a coincidence that there was a couple that was murdered there in Utah that worked at the same co-op just a few weeks ago. Is it connected? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see if anything comes from this investigation. Since that area is so large and there's so many open spaces, where do you even begin? Let's get to the docket. The judge in the Barry Morphy matter, Judge Patrick Murphy, is giving his ruling as to whether there's enough evidence to hold Barry Morphy for killing his wife and set the matter over for an arraignment, an ultimate trial, or maybe some sort of disposition. And for those who don't know, obviously Barry Morphy faces 5 felony charges, including the charge of first-degree murder for the death of his wife, Suzanne. He's currently being held without bond in the Chaffee County Jail. And Suzanne Morphy, 49, was reported missing over Mother's Day weekend in 2020. Now, before Judge Patrick Murphy will make the ruling, he's allowing both the defense and the prosecution to make a closing argument. Now, the judge is also going to make a decision on whether or not that the 130-page arrest affidavit is going to be unsealed. I can tell you, thus far, as we are filming this video right now, we believe the judge has stated that the court has found probable cause and that he believes that there is sufficient evidence for the case to go forward as it relates to the first-degree murder charge and the tampering with a corpse. There's also some indication that a bond will be given to Barry Morphy, which means the judge is not going to find a proof evident presumption great. We don't know what the bond is as of right now, but if it comes to us while we're filming this, we will let you know. Now, as you may recall, I predicted the court would find probable cause because the preliminary hearing is a very low standard for the case to go forward on. And I also believe that the judge would not find proof evident presumption great, and that the judge would probably set the bond so high that Barry Morphy may not be able to make it. And of course, then after the preliminary hearing, you spend a lot of time and money trying to get out. And now the defendant is probably going to be wondering, wow, why did I spend all that money? I could have waived the preliminary hearing and got to this far. But I still think it was money well spent for Mr. Morphy. We will see how this case plays out. Good lawyers on both sides. Looks like there's a new attorney that's entered for the prosecution and another attorney that is entered for the defense. We'll talk about that more in upcoming shows, but good lawyers on both sides. We'll talk about it more. And as we are filming this video right now, the court has found that Barry Morphy, the government has failed to prove proof evident presumption great, and a bond will be given. Boom! I called it. We'll see if it's so high, though, that Barry can't make it. I still think it's going to be significant. And remember, the court, when setting the bond, has to set it so that it assures the defendant's appearance in court as well as protects the community. I think the bond is probably going to be set somewhere in the amount of $500,000 to $1 million. We'll have to wait and see. All right. Thanks for watching. That's all we have for you today. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time on Crime Talk.